some? Do you want me to give you? All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. Thank you all for coming. There are a couple of sheets of paper on all of your tables. One of them says sign in. So please do click that QR code and fill out that information, including the full name of your instructor. If you are here for a class or here for extra credit, we do want you to get credit for attendance or for extra credit. So definitely sign in and put the full name of your instructor so that we know who to send that attendance sheet to. The other things on your tables, so there is an evaluation. You will click on that at the end of the presentation. And then there are a couple of flyers for some future events, one that we're having next week, continuing our Founding Fathers series on Sam Adams, Patrick Henry, and Thomas Paine. And then one we're having at the end of April, a panel discussion on the Great Depression and Franklin Roosevelt. So a couple of upcoming events to keep in mind. Take some pictures of those if you are interested. But let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to the next in our series, Mythbusting the Founding Fathers. Today we discuss two men who are about as different as they can be, Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. These men were revolutionaries, founding fathers, and helped to form President Washington's first cabinet. But they realized fairly quickly that they did not believe in the same politics, and those political differences led to a lifelong political hatred and rivalry of one another that in turn led to the first political parties in the country, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. But who were these guys really? Did the musical get Hamilton right? Was Jefferson really that complicated a guy? Today, our esteemed historians, Chloe Northrup, Professor of History at the Connect campus, and Cindy Lewis, Professor of History at the Northeast campus, myth-bust Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, respectively. So without further ado, let the fighting program begin.
Oh, thanks. Right. Oh, good.
Should be
Oh.
There's a clicker. You want the clicker?
Yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's so nice to see so many people here. I work at Connect mostly, and so we ever only see little squares on Teams, so it's nice to see everybody here. And thank you for coming today to hear more about these two founding fathers. So to talk about Hamilton, we need to go back in time just a little bit for me. I remember the day I first heard about a Hamilton musical. I was reading news about upcoming Broadway shows, and I saw an announcement that Jonathan Groff had just been cast as King George III. Knowing Groff as both a Broadway actor and a voice character from Disney's Frozen, I immediately began searching for news for this musical. I was confused at first. Who in the world would want to listen to a musical about Alexander Hamilton? As a professor who teaches many survey-level U.S. history courses, the typical response concerning Hamilton is rather ambivalence. Many students before this musical came out did not know the basic biography of our founding father. Without a father? Recalling a glazed look on students in my survey-level U.S. history courses, I didn't know how anybody could get too excited about funding an assumption or the inner workings at the First Bank of the United States. Throughout 2015, I kept hearing about this musical, and after defending my dissertation at UNT, I treated myself to a quick weekend in New York on my favorite budget airlines flight, Spirit Airlines. And if you want to talk about Spirit later, I know they get a bad reputation. I love Spirit though, and this is the hill I will die on, and I'll bring up Spirit several times actually, because I really do love them. So I went there. So I went to see, and I thought, I'll just get a ticket when I'm there in 2015. I'll just get it. And it was still in previews at this point, I think. It would just open. It was great, it'll be fun. So I go, and I was I'll try the lottery. So I get there, and then I saw the line going around the entire building to sign up for the lottery, and I thought, wow, so this is something really interesting here. Now, if you know the lottery, you could enter your name in, and a lucky few could get either a front row seat, sometimes limited view, for a very discounted price. So my cousin and I were there. We gamely put our names in, and alas, we did not win. So at that moment, I think I realized that this was not a movement, it's a movement. Now, that day, Lin-Manuel Miranda and many of the original Broadway cast members came outside for their infamous Ham for Ham performances, and this one included the 10 Dual Commandments. It was also September 11, another reason we got a super discounted flight to New York, but again. So Miranda gave a heartfelt speech and resonated with the crowd and connected to the greatest city in the world. And it was a very emotional response. So again, we did not win that day. I went home with my whole goal to see the musical still frustrated. So weeks later, I'm sitting in a classroom, my students are taking the test, and I see that the cast album had dropped. So I started listening to it, and from the opening chorus, I was like, this is something so weird and so special. And so I said, I've got to go. So I started reaching out to my friends. I'm like, let's go back. Let's go to New York. Let's see it. None of my friends wanted to see it. So I got myself a limited view seat. I only had enough money for one night in a hotel. So it's I'll just spend the night on the LaGuardia floor for the second night. What could go wrong? And I went up and got to see it. The same night as Weird Al Yankovic, by the way. He was also in the crowd as well. You can spot him very easily. So I got to see it, the whole original cast, sans Daveed Diggs, who was on vacation. And it proved worth going up there at that time. And I returned, and I thought I was going to start incorporating it into my survey level courses. As a newly minted full-time faculty member, thanks to this man here, Dr. James Hathcock, I came here to the Northeast campus in fall 2016. And I remember the first time we were saying, what should we do for Constitution Day? And I said, Dr. Hathcock, I said, we should do something about Hamilton. And he's like, why? I'm like, because there's this musical. I'm like, you've got to listen to it. And I started trying to initiate all the uninitiated around me. I'm like, we've got to. And so we did. It was standing room only. Back then, they gave pizza away, everything. And so sometimes people came for pizza, but others came for the Hamilton, and they were really excited. Gave great reviews to it. And that was great. And so basically, the success of this made me start thinking, how could we incorporate this more into our classrooms? How could we start doing this intersection between public history and pop culture? And to that end, we ended up booking a small traveling exhibit about Hamilton that came here to this library, and it was really fun. I mean, students could listen to their Spotify playlist and see about our founding father right there. Now, my first assignment then had mixed results. This is pre-ChatGPT, so it was really interesting to see what students thought about this. Some of them actually liked it, but others said that they wouldn't play this music at their worst enemy's funeral. Ooh, right? So it was very interesting to see this mixed reaction. And as more accessibility came due to traveling tours, and the assignment started seeming less novel. I also presented about Hamilton at the Society of Early Americanists, and I remember this older guy who was there was like, why would anybody ever talk about this in a classroom? It's not historically accurate. And I remember saying, but shouldn't we engage with things that people actually care about? Shouldn't we incorporate these kind of things together? And so with this, we are seeing that I think in many ways, many people in academia were jealous because of the commercial success that this brought, and the fact that people did care about Hamilton when he was rapping on stage, but not when we were lecturing about him. So throughout 2016, my personal obsession grew, and this is a journey with me, if you will. Sharing the music with the uninitiated became my passion. This included my then 7-year-old niece, who is now 17, who could recite this musical with much exuberance. That winter, we were on our Christmas cruise, and I realized that the cruise stopped at St. Kitts, which is only a 30-minute ferry boat ride from Nevis. And so we went, I made my family go and see, look, the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton. It was really interesting. This bouncing, very ill ferry ride later, we got to this small Caribbean island. We had a small local museum that then had a display because they were also quite shocked that people again cared about Hamilton. I continued this journey as well, following Hamilton's own path from the Caribbean to New York just a few weeks later. And this trajectory seemed to be like emblematic, I would say, of the American dream. While walking through the halls of the Hamilton Grange, where Hamilton and his family once walked and lived their private lives, albeit not in the same location, it's been moved, we realized that our meeting here in this January coincided with Hamilton's birthday of January 11. We were not the only pilgrims seeking to follow Hamilton's path. A gentleman from St. Croix was also another visitor at the Grange, and he told us that he comes yearly on this sojourn up to New York to see the place where Hamilton lived, and he was from St. Croix, where Hamilton did spend a lot of his life. He shared how one year he brought up soil from Hamilton's mother's grave to put on his grave in Trinity Church in New York, Rachel Fawcett, his mother. And that year he'd actually brought up sugarcane prawns to remind then viewers and people of his West Indian connections. So we went to Trinity Church to see, and we saw this exactly on display. My family enjoyed a viewing of the musical as well, sans OBC, but still there first, very exciting. Again, she's 17 now. She'd be mortified if she knew I was sharing slides of her as a child. So I then edited a book about Hamilton phenomenon that made me really start thinking about these themes even more. So who is Alexander Hamilton? What do we know about him? Well, scant details are known really about his early years. Even his birth year is questioned by historians. We suspect he was born in either 1755 or maybe 1757. As I mentioned, he was born in Nevis. This is a very small West Indian island, but it was really important in the 18th century. It was part of the larger British Empire and was a sugar plantation colony. It represented one of many that included much larger islands that were part of the British Empire, like Jamaica, if you see kind of right over on the left, which is the jewel on the British crown of the 18th century. But also we think Barbados, St. Kitts, Antigua, and many others, especially with the French ceded islands after the French and Indian or 7 Years' War. So these are brutal conditions that he was raised in then, in colonies that produced sugar. And this was the most valuable colonial product in the 18th century. This is often described as a boom and bust lifestyle as well for these plantation elite, because great wealth can be made, but also there's disease, there's unstable weather conditions, and it could prove ruinous then for planters. In some cases then, in many cases, they could be completely ruined and have nothing. Now, this sweet product itself then came at the terrible, terrible cost for extreme misery for the enslaved population. In some cases, the lifespan for an enslaved person in the neighboring island of Jamaica averaged about 7 years from the introduction to the island to their death. So these horrific conditions really are going to set the stage for Hamilton's early childhood. His mother, Rachel Fawcett's early life had a rocky start, and her first marriage proved very unhappy. When she tried to leave her husband, John, he had her jailed. She then moved to Nevis, where she met James Hamilton, and they lived life as an unmarried couple together. And since she was not officially divorced when Alexander was born, his early prospects did not seem to offer much promise. He's unable to go to local school due to his illegitimacy, and he was likely enrolled in more private education, which set the stage for lifelong love of reading and learning. So although the union between Rachel and James lasted 15 years and produced 2 sons, James abandoned Rachel when Alexander was 8. Another event that signals a life of potential destitution rather than potential in riches, glory, fame, and anything else. Young Alexander then became a clerk, and after his mother's unfortunate death in 1768, he went to live with relatives. Disease was very common in the West Indies, and you see caricatures like this one satirizing the effects of yellow fever, malaria, and other elements common in the tropics. Working in the trade business allowed him to delve into kind of a new talent for him in business. He later credited this early education with his knack for financial matters, which would prove really important in his later life. He lived in St. Croix until the relative he was living with then committed suicide, and at that point, it left him once again bereft of mentors in his life. As many other young and ambitious individuals, he chafed at life on this small island and began to wonder what other opportunities could lie elsewhere. Like the titular song that begins the Hamilton musical and unfolds his early years, you all know then a terrible hurricane strikes St. Croix in 1772. The onslaught lasts 6 hours and had an awful effect on the town of Christiansted. He wrote a letter that ended up getting published in the Royal Danish American Gazette. And he wrote, "It is impossible for me to describe to you or inform you any idea of it. It seemed as if a total dissolution of nature was taking place. The roaring of the sea and wind, fiery meteors flying about it in the air, and a prodigious glare of almost perpetual lightning. The crash and falling of houses, and the ear-piercing shrieks of the distressed were sufficient to strike astonishment to the angels." So in the end, the wealthy plantation elite and white Creoles came together to raise money for Hamilton to study in North America in hopes that he would perhaps then return to this West Indian island and contribute to the intellectual life in the Caribbean. But his destiny lay elsewhere. So, upon arriving in New York then, he will meet Hugh Mulligan and his brother Hercules. And so he arrived in New York at a really interesting moment because this is the time, of course, of these really contentious debates regarding Britain's right to tax the American colonies. As you probably all know, Britain suffered debt in the French and Indian War, and British Parliament then fumbled trying to find ways to raise money from the colonies in order to help for paying the debt from the war, which largely benefited the colonies in the end. And protests in this period are going to range from boycotts to polite meetings, and they are going to raise liberty poles, even tarring and feathering agents. And actually, I just read this book about how they once tar and feathered a horse as well. And I had never read that before. Yeah, tarring and feathering a horse and put an effigy on someone and had it riding through town. And I thought that is terrifying. I can't horses are already scary. But can you imagine being tar and feathered with an effigy on it? Okay. So I'm kind of glad that that's gone out of style. I'm going to just say that. Okay, so things like that. They're doing and destruction of private property. So as a member of these infamous Sons of Liberty, Mulligan likely introduced Hamilton into the debates and various methods of protest. He also stayed with a prominent New York individual named William Livingston, who was a relative of his future wife, Elizabeth Schuyler. And also that man was a future governor and politician. Now, he wished to go to the College of New Jersey, which was later Princeton, and he was denied his request to compile his studies and finish early. And James Madison had just been allowed to do that and finish fast, but he also suffered a nervous breakdown, so they might have maybe it's not good for you. So he headed then for the more lively King's College in New York City. Now, although never graduating due to the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, he appeared to enjoy his studies. Now, as fans of the Hamilton music will remember, one Samuel Seabury published, instead of singing, I know it's sad, I think they should have just sang it, but he apparently published it in writing, his loyalist views concerning the British government. He is going to publish this, and Hamilton then wrote a rebuttal in 1774, which was the year of the First Continental Congress. And one of those responses was called A Farmer Refuted. And as tensions rose, Hamilton and his contemporaries began drilling in case fighting was needed. So with the meeting of the Second Continental Congress in 1775 and the appointment of George Washington as commander of the Continental Army, tensions then boiled into war. Now, while the British prepared to take New York City, Congress passed a Declaration of Independence, and a statue of George III was removed from New York City and hauled away to melt down for the war effort. And during the ensuing battle in New York, Hercules Mulligan later said that Hamilton and his men were responsible with taking some of the British cannon that were left by the British. Now, although the British overwhelmingly win the Battle of New York, the Continental Army lives to see another day. And without Washington's daring attack on the Hessians during Christmas, the revolution would have likely dissolved the next spring. That coming winter, Washington needed more staff. Several trusted advisors suggested the young Alexander Hamilton. So Hamilton then joins Washington's family in March 1777. That coming winter, that winter in Valley Forge proved super important for reality and historic memory. Washington ends up sending Hamilton to meet with General Gates, and this failure of his meeting with Gates ended up having him go to consult with Philip Schuyler. And that is an important meeting that he will have with his, of course, future father-in-law. Washington increasingly relied on Hamilton during 1778 and 1779. Now, one event that's not portrayed in the musical, but I think definitely deserves a little attention, is in 1780. And that is Benedict Arnold's traitorous design to betray West Point for the British. Now, Hamilton's connection to this event came due to him being at the Arnold's house when the plot was revealed. Hamilton wrote, "The discovery of a treason of the deepest dye. I went in pursuit of him, was much too late, and I could hardly regret the disappointment when, upon my return, I saw an amiable woman," Peggy Shippen, the wife, "an amiable woman frantic with distress for the loss of a husband she tenderly loved, a traitor to his country and to his fame, a disgrace to his connections. She, for a considerable time, entirely lost her senses. The general went up to see her, and she upbraided him for being in plot to murder her child. One moment she raved, another she melted into tears. Sometimes she pressed her infant to her bosom and lamented its fate, occasioned by the imprudence of its father in a manner that would have pierced insensibility itself." Now, many historians believe that Peggy Shippen was very much behind Benedict Arnold's whole betrayal and traitorous ways, and yet she was able to bamboozle him. And this is something we need to remember, that attractive women have the power to bamboozle Hamilton quite easily. So this would not be the last time this happens to him. Speaking of women, Hamilton married Elizabeth Schuyler in the winter of 1780 at her family's mansion in Albany, New York. In the Hamilton musical, it shows that Hamilton leaves Washington's staff due to his participation in a duel. In reality, there is a misunderstanding between the two in the spring of 1781, and Hamilton left to be with his wife. Other important developments included all eyes turning towards Virginia as General Cornwallis's men found themselves trapped due to a naval battle in the Chesapeake. And in July, Hamilton got a wish to finally lead, and he does, a light infantry battalion. And he played his part in taking a redoubt from the British and defeating the Hessians. So the loss at Yorktown then signaled the end for the British fighting in America. And following the end of the fighting during the American Revolution, Hamilton then began to study law. He is a member of the Confederation Congress in 1782, and during the period under the Articles of Confederation, Hamilton started really focusing on the debt. He believed that the debt had gone out of hand and was afraid at the weakness of the national government. He believed a stronger central government could be what America needed to be competitive on the world stage. So he is selected then to go to Philadelphia as a representative for the Constitutional Convention, and he is in his early 30s at this time. They decide to scrap the Articles of Confederation, and he is part of this committee that meets throughout the summer to propose a new constitution. He does some fairly radical things here. He's going to say, let one branch of the legislature hold their places for life, and let the executive be for life. These words will end up haunting him later on, where he'll be accused of anarchical preferences. Now, in order to sway these important states of Virginia and especially New York, he was part of the spearheading of writing the Federalist Papers, writing 51 out of 85. From his law office in New York, he supported Washington's nomination and acceptance of the presidency. And he then establishes the precedent of doing then the first cabinet. Hamilton, of course, will serve as the first Secretary of the Treasury. His wife, Elizabeth, remained at home in Albany, and he knew how terrible the nation's financial situation was and was prepared to tackle it head on. He is going to do things like craft the report on public credit in 1790, and he comes up with a very ingenious and complicated plan to deal with the domestic debt. He also proposes a national bank as well, new taxes like one on whiskey, and during this period, his former friend and colleague, James Madison, began opposing Hamilton, and we start seeing the beginnings of our First Nations party, and this heated rivalry, if you will. Did anyone laugh at that at the beginning or no? Like, okay, we can chat later about it if you didn't think it's funny. It's okay. So in order to get the plan passed through, Thomas Jefferson hosts a dinner party where the two statesmen end up debating, and Madison ends up supporting Hamilton's plans, and Hamilton persuades his allies in Congress to push for a capital in the Potomac. Now, here we get to some dicey situations. In the summer of 1791, Elizabeth, Hamilton, and their 4 children then go to Albany for the summer. He then meets Maria Reynolds and begins an inappropriate relationship. When he tries to terminate the affair, her husband extorted him for $1,000, and that is a lot of money at the time. He does pay it. He ends up paying more over time to keep the Reynoldses quiet. When James Reynolds was later jailed for perjury, he let it slip that he had some damning evidence against the Secretary of the Treasury. Word got around even to future President James Monroe and others who approached Hamilton about this situation. Fun fact, later on when Elizabeth Hamilton is super, super old, James Monroe came over to visit and she wouldn't accept him in the home because she was still salty about this from 50 years earlier. The woman can hold a grudge, and I kind of love that. All right, so it leaks though 4 years later, which then the story itself, and then Hamilton publishes the infamous Reynolds pamphlet, which included, quote, excessive detail of the sordid affair. And meanwhile, he's facing other problems as well, both domestically and in his position as Secretary of the Treasury. He faced fierce opposition from the Democratic Republicans, which I'm sure we're about to hear a little bit more about. And he is going to publish a lot under pseudonyms in Federalist newspapers to try to counteract that. There's also problems on the high seas due to the Anglo-French conflict that's rising from the French Revolution. And these all things, including things like Jay's Treaty, are going to rock Washington's cabinet. There's also the Whiskey Rebellion in 1793. His wife, Elizabeth, then suffers a miscarriage, and Hamilton then decides to retire from Washington's administration and return to private life in 1795. These events tired the Washington administration as well, as he will decline to run again in 1796. So as we know, Washington then retires and heads back home to Mount Vernon, setting this precedent for 2 terms, and that's only broken by FDR, which we're hearing more about that later, right, this semester, maybe? I don't remember. Okay, good. So that is, Hamilton ends up helping craft Washington's farewell address, and we get to the Adams administration then. Now, John Adams, of course, gets the most electoral votes, and Thomas Jefferson, the Democratic Republican, then gets the second most. Now, Hamilton does not have an official role, but a lot of the leading Federalists still write to him and ask his advice, and he's kind of like, many say, a puppeteer behind the scenes. And at one point, Adams is going to raise an army again, ask Washington to lead, and Washington wants to bring Hamilton by his side. Hamilton and Adams do not get along at all. And so really, with Washington's death in 1799 and a return to more favorable relations, Hamilton's dream of an enlarged army and potentially maybe even leading it goes away. Now this gets us, of course, to the election of 1800, which finds Hamilton at the center of action once again. The Democratic Republicans were determined not to let Adams be involved at all as either president or vice president, so they concoct a plan for Jefferson to win the presidency and Aaron Burr to win the vice presidency. However, as you guys probably all know, the election ends up tied. And so there's kind of some confusion in the musical where they're like, it's up to Hamilton. Hamilton doesn't like have an official role here, but again, Federalists then looked to him. They're like, you know both guys, who's better? Who should we choose here? He has crossed paths over both of them throughout his career, and he says, though, in a letter written to one of the electors here, he's going to say, the latter, Aaron Burr, in my judgment has no principle, public or private, could be bound by no agreement, will listen to no monitor but his ambition, and for this purpose will use the worst part of the community as a ladder to climb to permanent power and instrument to crush the better part. He is bankrupt beyond redemption. From the elevation of such a man, heaven preserve this country. So Jefferson ends up winning, and Burr becomes vice president. And at this point, Hamilton's political influence is really dimming in the Democratic-Republican administration. He turns then to his 8 children at the time, and to his work on the Hamilton Grange in this home that was in Upper Manhattan. If you watched the musical, you probably know his son died in a duel in 1801. And the Hamiltons then named a son born in 1802, Philip, after the son who had died earlier in his honor. Now, in 1804, Burr is going to turn his sights to run for governor of New York. Hamilton thwarts this once again. Typically, such grievances can be resolved with letter correspondences, apologies, but this did not happen. Now, to citizens in the early 1800s, challenging someone to a duel made sense in their code of honor at the time. Now, duels are typically fought over all kinds of things: love affairs, family issues, political slights. Perhaps stemming from European trial by combat, it is in fact illegal in the United States, but is not really vigorously prosecuted. And often these occurrences did not end in death, but it was about the restoration of this perceived code of honor. Rather, that's really, I would say, like rather foreign to modern observers. Again, I do, though, hear my students every semester say that this is like a rap battle, though, or something like that. So we can discuss this afterwards if you think that that's like akin to what we're seeing here. But like, hopefully without anyone dying. So this escalated, and the 2 men find themselves in Weehawken, New Jersey to duel. It's unclear, of course, what happens. Many say that Hamilton was not intending to shoot. Burr, he dies either way, right? So in the end, if Hamilton shot in the air and Burr shot him, his shot rang true and lodged in Hamilton's spine, and he died the next day. His final letter was, "My dear Eliza, this will not be delivered to you unless I shall have first terminated my earthly career, to begin, as I humbly hope, from redeeming grace and divine mercy, a happy immortality." Again, leaving her with 8 children, or however many were still living at the time, I'd be like, really? Really? So it had it been possible for me to have avoided the interview, my love for you and my precious children would have been alone a decisive motive, but it was not possible. Without sacrifices which would have rendered me unworthy of your esteem. I need not to tell you the pangs I feel from the idea of quitting you and exposing you to the anguish which I know you will feel. Nor could I dwell on the topic lest it should unman me. The consolation of religion, my beloved, can alone support you, and these you have a right to enjoy. Fly to the bosom of your God and be comforted. With my last idea, I shall cherish the sweet hope of meeting you in a better world. Adieu, best of wife and best of women. Embrace all my darling children for me. Whew. So he is then buried in July 14. Oh, that's the spot in Weehawken, so he's not buried there. He's buried here in Trinity Church in New York on July 14 in Lower Manhattan with full military honors. And his legacy really wanes over the years. Many Democratic Republicans later incorporate a lot of Hamiltonian views, but his unpopularity caused him to wane in public memory. There were 500 people, though, who attended a dedication of a Hamilton statue in New York. I'm taking a selfie back. In 1880, one of his sons raised money to do this. And he's also, of course, on the $10 bill and has been depicted on U.S. currency more than any other individual. Now, in 2015, it was actually announced that he was going to get replaced on the $10 bill. But as you all know, that's the year Hamilton came out, and that wasn't going to happen, right? Now, Lin-Manuel Miranda famously was reading this book on vacation by Ron Chernow, a biography, and he said, like, this is like the story, like this is the American dream here. This is a rap story of like coming from humble origins and then making a big success. And so he says, I'm going to write a musical about a founding father without a father. It won 11 of 16 Tonys that year, and it shattered Broadway box office records. It became the fastest musical to gross $1 billion. Then, of course, it's on Disney+. It's far more accessible now, and a larger audience could watch it. And in the first 10 days of streaming, 2.7 million accounts streamed the musical. And there's also, of course, touring productions, one coming to Fort Worth this summer. Planning on doing a field trip with Connect, so if you want information, let me know. We're trying to, now you have to come and discuss primary sources or something to earn your way. But let me know, I'll give you the QR code if you're interested. And so, well, maybe this summer you will not throw away your shot and join us in seeing the musical. Thank you all.
Is that a microphone? Yeah. I don't know where the clicker is. This is a microphone. Take it away. Thank you. Oh, no, loose words. Okay, I'll tell you when. All right, hi everybody. How you doing? Again, thanks for coming. My name is Cindy Lewis. I teach history here at Northeast, and I'm going to be talking to you about Thomas Jefferson, or as I call him in my classes, Tommy Jeffs. So this is the truth, some of it painful, about Thomas Jefferson. Slide, por favor. Also, I forgot to mention before that there are no AI-generated images in this presentation whatsoever. These are all completely legitimate. This is Thomas Jefferson playing with his mutant hands, Call of Duty. I think he's got 8 fingers on that one. All right, so let's start with Thomas Jefferson's early life. Born April 13th, 1743 at Shadwell in colonial Virginia, Jefferson grew up in a wealthy slave-holding planter family. His father, Peter Jefferson, was a successful land surveyor and a planter. His mother, Jane Randolph, was the daughter of a wealthy British ship captain and a planter. Growing up, Jefferson received a strong classical education, studying Latin, Greek, philosophy, and science. In 1761, Jefferson enrolled at the College of William and Mary, where he studied mathematics, philosophy, and literature. He later went on to study law under George Wythe. During his studies, Jefferson was deeply influenced by Enlightenment thinkers such as John Locke, Baron de Montesquieu, Francis Bacon, and these influences would later on to go to shape his beliefs about natural rights, individual liberty, and the importance of the consent of the governed. And we'll see how those go on to shape the Declaration and the Constitution and things like that. Next slide. Again, no AI used in any of these. So Jefferson's early political career. He began his political career officially in 1769 when he was elected to serve on the House of Burgesses, which was the governing assembly in colonial Virginia. As a young legislator, Jefferson quickly aligned himself with many reform-minded leaders such as Patrick Henry and George Washington. During his early political career, relations between the American colonies and Great Britain worsened drastically. This was following the 7 Years' War when, as my colleague mentioned, Parliament begins to pretty heavily tax the colonies. And Jefferson was one of many who opposed these measures based on there being no colonial representation in Parliament. How many of you have heard the slogan? What's the slogan? No taxation without representation. Very good. You all get an A for the day. So he opposes these measures, again, arguing that the colonists were entitled to the same rights and liberties as all other Englishmen. And in 1774, he titles this work known as A Summary View of the Rights of British America, in which he argues that, several points actually, that the colonists were not directly entitled, subject to Parliament. Their only legitimate tie was to the king. So in other words, he's kind of arguing that they don't have to answer to Parliament. He also argues that The colonists possessed these so-called natural rights that can't be violated, and that British interference in colonial affairs was unjust, right? So he's starting to make these early points that go on to shape these later on much more influential documents. Next. As a founding father, Jefferson represented Virginia in the Continental Congress beginning in 1775, where he quickly gained a reputation for his writing ability and political thought. This is an interesting little tidbit about Jefferson. He was very shy at public speaking. He didn't communicate very well speaking to people, so this is how he got really strong at writing and expressing his ideas through writing. So in 1776, he was chosen, because of his strength in expressing ideas through writing, he was chosen to draft the Declaration of Independence, a little-known document. You probably never heard of it, right? And in this, he formally, essentially, we break up with Great Britain. It's the goodbye text that we send to Great Britain. He also outlines key principles such as, again, natural rights, popular sovereignty, the idea that government, get this crazy idea, exists to serve the people that it governs, right? Kind of crazy nowadays, or any day really, if you look at it hard enough. And it also says that, or asserts, that the citizens in that society have the right to overthrow a government that violates their rights. And these, at the time, were kind of controversial taboo topics, especially since he's addressing this to whom? Who's he writing this to? Who? The king, right? The king, that's some audacity, right? So he lists, after this, he lists specific grievances against King George III, including things like taxation without representation, maintaining standing armies within the colonies, interfering in colonial self-government, all of which are used to justify this cause for independence. Don't click it yet. Can we have him fired? Just kidding, he's great. Jefferson's ideas about government emphasize limited power, federal power, protection of individual liberties, and the importance of an educated citizenry in sustaining a democratic republic. Although he was not present for the Constitutional Convention, as he was serving as Minister to France at the time, he strongly supported the addition of a Bill of Rights to safeguard individual freedoms, personal liberties. Through his correspondence with James Madison, he influenced the creation of the Bill of Rights, which was adopted in 1791, and guaranteed essential freedoms such as, name a couple. Who can name right off the top of your head?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech? Yes. The right to bear arms, right? We're in Texas. Everybody knows that one. That's number one. What else? Yes, all of those, right? So those are our Bill of Rights. If you're not aware of them, study them. They're important. So it's a lot of Jefferson's ideas that go into the formation of the Bill of Rights because, again, he's one of those that's fearful of an overly powerful federal government, and he wants these protections of those individual liberties, right? So, again, the Bill of Rights is added to the Constitution in 1791. And for a lot of people, that's the tipping point in accepting and ratifying the Constitution. Next up. Here he is as Minister to France. I love these so much. But it gets worse. It gets worse. Excuse me. As the American Revolution continued, Jefferson served as governor of Virginia from 1779 to 1781. This was a difficult period during the war when British forces directly threatened the state of Virginia. Although Jefferson's governorship faces criticism largely due to military challenges, it does strengthen his experience in executive leadership, which is preparing him for what in the future? Presidency, right? Following this, Jefferson is appointed to Minister of France, which he serves from 1785 to 1789, where he represents the United States abroad and has an opportunity to observe the early stages of the French Revolution, which is a real, ours was cool and all, ours was cool, but theirs was gangster, right? The French Revolution was gangster. Anyway, so Jefferson witnesses all of this, and it reinforces his support for Republican ideals, right? And widespread democratic participation with that asterisk, because of course he doesn't mean everybody. Upon returning to the United States, Jefferson became the first Secretary of State under George Washington. In this role, he advises on foreign policy and quickly emerges as a leader who continues to favor limited federal power. It was during this time that his rivalry with that no good dirt, I'm just kidding, Alexander Hamilton starts to develop. As Secretary of the Treasury, as we've just heard, Alexander Hamilton comes up with a pretty detailed and ambitious federal financial plan, which aims to stabilize the nation's economy, strengthen the federal government, encourage economic growth, especially with an emphasis on manufacturing, which Jefferson seems to have a real problem with. Why does Jefferson have an issue with so much emphasis being put on manufacturing? He's a farmer, right? All of his money comes from agriculture. And so for that reason and the argument that this financial plan is going to make the federal government way too powerful, Jefferson and several others oppose it. Now, this opposition to Hamilton's financial plan reveals much deeper personal and political rivalries between the two. They are very different individuals. They never really trust each other. But these issues that develop between these two men contribute to the rise of the first political parties in the United States, which, of course, has this very long legacy in political parties in the U.S., right? Excuse me, my allergies are great. Jefferson later served as vice president under John Adams from 1797 to 1801, during which time he continues to oppose these Federalist policies, and he helps shape the very quickly emerging two-party system in the United States. Next slide, por favor. I love this one. I can't stand it. We got a little too ridiculous with the archival paintings that we found at the Louvre. I don't know. Okay, so in the presidential election of 1800, both Thomas Jefferson and his running mate Aaron Burr received 73 electoral votes, resulting, of course, in a tie. This decision was then sent to the House of Representatives, which was at the time controlled by the Federalists. After 36 ballots, Jefferson was finally chosen as president. Now, interestingly, Jefferson's political rival, none other than that dirty slime bag, I'm just kidding, Hamilton's great, Alexander Hamilton plays a pretty crucial role in securing Jefferson's victory. How does Hamilton feel about Thomas Jefferson as a person, as a politician, as a leader? He's not super fond of him. So Hamilton doesn't like Jefferson, but he deeply distrusts Aaron Burr. As you saw by that seething quote, I was uncomfortable reading that, right? Hamilton doesn't have a whole lot of faith in Aaron Burr as a person, as a political leader. So Hamilton throws his support behind Jefferson and helps to secure him the victory, helps secure the presidency for him, right? So during his administration, the United States experienced significant growth, but also continued to face important policy challenges, especially on the foreign front. One of Jefferson's greatest achievements was the Louisiana Purchase, in which the United States bought the Louisiana Territory from France for $15 million. The acquisition of this piece of property doubled the size of the nation, secured control of the Mississippi River, and opened these vast lands out west for future expansion. Now, to explore this new territory, Jefferson commissioned the Lewis and Clark expedition. And if you haven't picked up on it, this is Thomas Jefferson driving a Ford Expedition with the license plate that says Lewis and Clark. We were too brilliant with this, my colleague and I, right? So the expedition mapped the western lands, established relations with Native American tribes out west, and provided valuable scientific and geographic information about the region, helping to strengthen the already very prominent U.S. claims to the west. Now, despite these successes, Jefferson's presidency was also marked by increasing tensions with Britain. Great Britain continues to interfere with American trade, impress American soldiers, which leads to very quickly rising tensions and eventual conflict. In response to these tensions, Jefferson supports the Embargo Act of 1807, which halted American trade with foreign nations in an effort to avoid war. Well, this in turn backfires, hurting the U.S. economy, devastating the United States economy, and proving very unpopular among pretty much everybody, but especially American merchants, right? Jefferson is trying to avoid war, crashes the economy. Patterns here, right? Next slide. Oh, this is, I don't know if they, like I said, it gets worse. After leaving the presidency, Jefferson retires to Monticello, where he devoted much of his time to intellectual pursuits, agriculture, and architecture. Monticello reflected Jefferson's interests in classical design, science, and innovation, and it remained both his home and a working plantation. One of his most important achievements during retirement was founding of the University of Virginia in 1819, as you can see pictured here, where he's attending one of the first frat parties held on campus. Jefferson played a direct role in designing the campus itself, developing the curriculum, and continuing to promote the idea that education was an essential element in a democratic society. He believed that an informed and educated citizenry was critical to the success and the endurance of a republic. Now, despite retiring from public office, Jefferson remained politically active through regular correspondence with other political leaders, including John Adams. In these letters, he continues to discuss political philosophy, government, the future of the United States, which demonstrated his ongoing influence about American political thought, right? Now, Jefferson dies on July 4th, 1826, at the age of 83 in Monticello. It was the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. That same day, Jefferson's longtime friend and political rival, John Adams, also died just hours later in Massachusetts. That's a little odd. It's a little strange, a little kooky, right? They were both murdered. I'm just kidding. I don't know if they were both murdered. It's interesting. All right, next slide. Jefferson's obviously complicated legacy, right? My colleagues here will probably agree that teaching Jefferson is interesting. For those of you who study Jefferson in your fun free time, I don't know, any of you do that? Don't be ashamed of it. It's okay. We're all nerds here. He's a complicated guy, but many of them are. So his legacy is both highly influential and deeply complicated. On one hand, he obviously made these lasting contributions to the development of the United States and its core ideals, right? These are ideals that we're proud of. We consider to be central to our American identity. Now, on the other hand, his life and actions, particularly regarding slavery, stand in stark contrast to those ideals, right? So his contributions to American history are significant. As the primary author of the Declaration of Independence, he articulates the foundational principles of equality, natural rights, government by consent of the governed, right? We consent to be governed, and therefore we give that government its power and its authority. And Jefferson's emphasis on liberty, democracy, and on an educated citizenry continue to shape American political thought, right? A lot of the way that we continue to view ourselves as a nation and as a people can be traced all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and the way he thought about these things. However, Thomas Jefferson's legacy is complicated by his lifelong involvement in slavery. He enslaved over the course of his life more than 600 people, relying on their labor for his economic and political power. Although he wrote at length that slavery was morally wrong and eventually harmful to society, he took no significant action to end slavery, and over the course of his life, he freed very few of his enslaved. Now, in addition to this, Jefferson fathered several children with one of his enslaved women, a woman named Sally Hemings, with whom he began an unconsensual sexual relationship when she was just 14 years old. So, complicated to say the least, right? Next slide. The contrast raises important historical questions. How can a man who declared that all men are created equal also participate in and benefit from slavery? Historians continue to debate how Jefferson should be judged, right? Should he be judged on his ideals, his actions, or both? And really, we could apply that to almost everyone that we find in our textbooks, right? How do we judge this person? By his time, by his behaviors? All in all, His legacy is often understood as a reflection of both the promise and the contradictions that are at the heart of the early United States and are still present in today's American society, right? So is Jefferson so far removed from who we are as a nation? Not so much, for better or worse. And now again, these are actual historical documents. As American as you can get, do y'all want to know how we created this? Raise your hand if you're partly responsible for these ridiculous images. That's right, him right here, okay? What we did is we put the basic prompt into an AI generator and we just yelled at it to make it more and more patriotic. And so this is this is Professor Guerrero's, right? His eagle has armor, right? It's fully armored. He's got King George here crying. He's eating a burger and a hot dog. There are fighter jets overboard. This one is mine. It's got Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders eating ridiculously enlarged hot dogs. Again, flying on an eagle. Yeah, so that's Thomas Jefferson. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again to Professors Northrup and Lewis for those talks on two of our founding fathers. Does anybody have any questions? No questions about Alexander Hamilton? Okay. Professor Guerrero.
I would like to ask Professor Lewis, is it possible to ride an eagle?
I haven't been able to catch one. As soon as I catch one, I'll let you.
Not at all. Not at all. Any other questions? Oh, no? Thought I saw a hand. All right. So before you leave, if you would please find this sheet of paper on your table. There's a QR code for evaluation. Please do fill that out. Let us know what you think. We do look at these evaluations to figure out what kind of programs we want to offer in the future, what kind of programs you might want to see in the future. So definitely fill that out. Thank you all for coming. Grab some candy, grab a drink before you go. Next time, it's Thomas Paine, Patrick Henry, and Sam Adams.